Have you ever found yourself making the same mistakes over and over again, as if something invisible is guiding your decisions? Or perhaps you carry a constant feeling of inadequacy, even when everything seems to be going well. If any of these experiences sound familiar, it could be that there's a hidden pain deep inside, a wound that began in your relationship with your father. This paternal wound does not have to involve obvious aggression or absence. Often it arises in silences, unspoken, expectations or glances that never came. And the most profound thing about all this is that, according to Carl Jung, even if you are not aware of this pain, it can be shaping your identity, your relationships, and your most important choices. But there is a path to healing. And in this video, we will explore this journey together, based on Jungian psychology, understanding where this wound comes from, how it manifests itself, and, most importantly, how to begin to free yourself. Before we continue, make sure you're already subscribed to the channel. Here we talk about emotional healing, awareness, and transformation, and you're very welcome to join us on this journey. Let us now understand clearly what this paternal wound is and how it begins to form in our lives. What is the father wound? The father wound is a deep emotional pain that originates from our relationship with the father figure, whether he is present or absent, authoritarian or indifferent, loving or overly critical. What defines this wound is not only what happened, but what was missing. Support, validation, protection, listening. Many times it is silent, invisible even to us. We grow up believing that certain voids are part of life, when in fact they are echoes of a broken connection, or one that was never built. This pain sets in during childhood, when we begin to form our vision of the world and of ourselves. The father, or whoever has occupied this role in our lives, represents the figure of authority, security, and symbolically our value in the world. When this bond is lacking, we develop the feeling of not being good enough, of needing to constantly prove something, or of having to hide parts of who we are in order to be accepted. There are different ways this wound can manifest itself. Emotional or physical absence. The father who was not present, even though he was there. Excessive criticism and demands. The child who was never enough. Extreme authoritarianism. The father who left no room for individuality. Indifference or coldness. The child who grew up trying to win affection that never came. Constant comparisons. The father who placed his son as a shadow of another ideal. These experiences generate consequences that we carry into adult life. Fear of failure, difficulty in trusting our own decisions, relationships marked by insecurity or submission, self-sabotage, a constant search for external validation, especially from male figures such as bosses, mentors, or partners. But it is important to understand, this wound is not a sentence, it is a call, an invitation to look within, recognize what hurt, and begin to rebuild our identity away from the burden of parental approval. This is exactly where Carl Jung's psychology offers us a map for this journey, and to move forward, we need to understand how Jung saw this father figure, not just as a real man, but as an archetypal symbol that inhabits our unconscious. Carl Jung's view on the father and the EIE, unconscious. For Carl Jung, the father was not just a concrete figure, he was also an archetype, a universal image that inhabits our collective unconscious. He represents order, structure, discipline, authority, and most importantly, the guiding principle of identity. It is through the father figure that we learn, or should learn, to position ourselves in the world, trust our voice, and act with direction. When this figure fails, whether through absence, rigidity, or coldness, it is not just the relationship with the biological father that is broken. The psychological foundation on which we build our sense of worth and autonomy is also broken. Jung believed that the personal unconscious stores all the undigested experiences of childhood, and when these experiences involve the father, they form cores of pain that remain active even after we grow up. It is these wounds that make us react disproportionately to criticism, feel fearful in the face of authority figures, or even sabotage our own progress because we feel unworthy. These repressed contents end up forming what Jung called the shadow, the part of the psyche that houses everything we reject, deny, or cannot accept in ourselves. And a large part of our shadow originates precisely from our attempts to adapt to the demands or absence of the father. For example, if you have been repressed for showing emotion, you may have cast your sensitivity into the shadow. If you constantly sought approval from a critical parent, you may have developed a perfectionist character, your persona, to hide deep insecurities. If you were abandoned, you may have projected that abandonment onto all your future relationships, expecting to always be rejected. The persona, for Jung, is the social mask we wear to be accepted. And when this mask is shaped to please or defy the parental figure, it can become so rigid that we lose touch with who we really are. It is at this point that the father's wound begins to silently shape the individual's entire life. Instead of acting freely, he reacts to internal patterns that repeat themselves like a script. He does not choose, he repeats. Jung then proposed a process called individuation, the journey of becoming who one truly is, integrating the shadow, recovering what was lost, breaking with unconscious patterns. And this journey invariably involves reconciliation with the father figure, real and symbolic. This reconciliation does not mean excusing or justifying past attitudes, but recognizing how this figure still lives within us, controlling reactions, fears, and behaviors. Until we bring this to consciousness, the wound continues to operate behind the scenes of our lives. Therefore, understanding how the paternal wound works is the first step to transforming it. It is not necessary to fix the father or wait for him to change. The work is internal. It is about observing the marks that have been left and recovering little by little the personal power that was transferred to this figure. Now that you understand the symbolic and unconscious dimension of the paternal wound, according to Jung, you may be asking yourself, how do I know if this wound is still active in my life? That's exactly what we're going to explore next. Signs that the wound is active in your life. Knowing that a wound exists is the first step, but how exactly does it manifest itself? How do we realize that it is active and influencing our choices, even many years after the events that caused it? The paternal wound does not scream. It whispers, hiding in the details of everyday life. It appears in moments when we react with disproportionate intensity, in decisions that seem unreasonable, in feelings of inadequacy that arise out of nowhere. It disguises itself as personality, but it is simply a pattern of emotional survival. Here are some of the most common signs. 1. Constant fear of making mistakes. People who had a very critical or punitive parent tend to develop an extremely rigid relationship with mistakes. The simple act of trying something new can be accompanied by panic, self-criticism, and paralysis. Each step is calculated out of fear of disapproval, even when the parent is no longer present. 2. Difficulty with authority figures. People with paternal wounds tend to live in extremes. Either they submit too much to bosses and superiors, or they confront them aggressively. In both cases, there is an unconscious projection of the father figure in these relationships. It is not the boss who is being challenged or feared. It is the father's shadow still active within the psyche. 3. Excessive search for validation. Praise can become the only emotional anchor. The person lives for external approval, especially from male figures. When they do not receive recognition, they feel invisible and invalid. This search is a reflection of a love that was not received in childhood, and that they now try to win everywhere. 4. Relationships marked by insecurity or control. The absence of a healthy paternal bond can generate insecurity in relationships. The person fears being abandoned, rejected, betrayed, or they assume total control, trying to avoid any emotional risk. In both cases, love becomes a battlefield with the ghosts of the past. 5. Sabotaging moments of success. When the father was absent, indifferent, or critical, the child internalizes the idea that he or she does not deserve recognition. In adulthood, when approaching important achievements, the person unconsciously creates obstacles, postpones decisions, and becomes disorganized, as if he or she could not bear his or her own light. These signs do not all appear at the same time, nor in all contexts, but one or two are enough to realize that there is something unresolved there, demanding attention. And no, this is not weakness. It is just a defense mechanism that was once necessary, but that may no longer be useful today. The good news is that these patterns are not permanent. With awareness, they can be transformed. Recognition is already healing in motion. Observing these signs is like shining a flashlight in a dark room. Little by little, you begin to see where you are, what you are carrying, and what you need to let go of. Now that you can identify the role of this wound in your life, let's go a step further. Let's understand how it has shaped your most important decisions and often sabotaged your very identity. How this wound affects your choices and identity. When a wound is not healed, it begins to act behind the scenes. And in the case of the paternal wound, the effects are profound, as this figure is directly linked to the construction of our identity, the image we have of ourselves and our place in the world. Have you ever wondered why you repeat certain patterns in relationships, even though you know they are harmful? Have you noticed that you avoid certain opportunities because you are afraid of not being able to cope? Or do you feel deep down that you're living a version of yourself that does not represent who you really are? These distortions often don't come from the present. They come from the past, from unconscious attempts to compensate for the father's absence, judgment, or silence. 1. Career choices based on approval. Many people pursue careers that do not reflect their talents or passions, but rather a desire to please or displease their father. They choose professions that they believe are respectable, safe, or honorable in his eyes, even if it costs them personal fulfillment. Others rebel, following opposite paths simply to distance themselves, which still keeps their father as a role model. 2. Relationships that repeat the same script. The dynamics of the paternal wound also appear in romantic relationships. It is common to attract partners who are emotionally similar to the father, cold, distant, controlling, or else adopt the role of the father within the relationship, trying to provide, control, or save the other. In all cases, there is a plot that repeats itself, as if the inner child were still trying to fix what he never had. 3. Difficulty in asserting who you are. When we grow up trying to meet external expectations, especially those of our fathers, we learn to hide parts of ourselves. And so our true identity is stifled. The person becomes someone who fulfills roles, the successful one, the responsible one, the rebel. But deep down, they feel like they are playing a he character. Jung would call this the persona dominating the self, the mask overriding the essence. 4. Fear of shining. Internalized parental criticism can create a deep-seated belief. I don't deserve to be seen. This translates into self-sabotaging behaviors in adulthood. The person has talent and potential, but avoids standing out. Whenever they are about to achieve something important, a crisis, a mistake, an excuse arises. Success threatens the narrative built around the wound. 5. Excessive. Rationalization and control. Some people, in order to avoid feeling pain, create emotional defenses based on absolute control. They rationalize everything, avoid vulnerability, and remain constantly alert. This armor was built to survive an unsafe emotional environment, but today, it may be preventing deep connections, spontaneity, and freedom of being. The identity formed under the shadow of the father's wound is not authentic. It is an adaptation, and like all adaptations, it is tiring, limiting, and takes its toll. Living with an identity shaped by fear, rejection, or the need to prove something is not living, it is surviving. But it is possible to break out of this cycle, and the first step is what you are doing now, looking at this wound with sincerity and courage. And here's an important invitation. If any part of this chapter spoke directly to you, share it in the comments. You may be expressing something that many people also feel, but can't put into words. Your comment can open the door for healing for others and for your own. In the next chapter, we will take a decisive step, understanding how to heal this wound through Carl Jung's vision. Get ready to delve into practices and reflections that can transform the way you see yourself and relate to your story. The path to healing, according to Carl Jung. Carl Jung said, "What you resist persists. What you accept transforms." And when we talk about the father wound, this is the fundamental principle of healing. Looking at pain, not as an enemy, but as a part of you that is asking for attention. Healing, according to Jung, does not happen from the outside in. It comes from a process of individuation, the journey of becoming who you really are, freeing yourself from the masks you have constructed to survive, and integrating the parts of yourself that have been rejected or forgotten. This process is neither linear nor quick, but it is profoundly liberating. Below are some of the paths Jung proposed and that you can start following today. 1. Make the unconscious conscious. The first step is to realize how the paternal wound is still operating. How do you act when you feel pressured? How do you react to authority? How do you deal with mistakes, failures, and success? Observe yourself honestly and without judgment. Self-awareness is the key that unlocks the door to transformation. When you identify a pattern, you begin to gain power over it. As long as you remain unconscious, it rules your life, and you call it destiny. 2. Integrate the shadow. The shadow is everything you have hidden in order to fit in, and much of it comes from your relationship with your father. Jung didn't see the shadow as something bad, but as something incomplete. Integrating it is bringing light to what has been rejected. How to do this in practice? Ask yourself, what did I need to hide from myself to be accepted by my father? Identify repressed qualities: sensitivity, spontaneity, vulnerability, creativity. Allow yourself to reclaim these parts, even if it's just a little bit. Authenticity begins when you stop asking for permission to exist fully. 3. Redefine the image of the father. This is a delicate but necessary point. The real father cannot be changed, but the way he lives inside you can. A powerful practice is the therapeutic letter. Write to your father without intending to send it. Say everything that has never been said. Express hurts, questions, frustrations. Allow yourself to feel. Then read the letter out loud. The goal is not to create conflict, but to unfreeze emotions that have been trapped in silence. If possible, also write a letter of response as if you were your parent, asking for forgiveness or acknowledgement. Even if you have to imagine this scenario, it can have a profound impact on your psyche, opening up space for healing and closure. 4. Reconnect with your own worth. During childhood, our sense of self-worth often came, or should have come, from parental validation. When that failed, we sought that value outside ourselves, but Jung believed that the true center of inner strength comes from the self, the core of our psyche. It's time to bring the value back in. To do this, develop a more compassionate inner dialogue. Use affirmations like, "Even though my father didn't validate me, I am enough." With every decision, ask yourself, am I doing this for myself, or am I trying to prove something to someone else? Practice small acts of autonomy. This rebuilds little by little the trust that has been broken. 5. Seek safe support. Healing the paternal wound also involves relationships with other men or authority figures who do not reinforce the old pattern. This could be a therapist, a mentor, a friend. Spending time with emotionally mature people helps to reconfigure our perception of what it means to be cared for, respected, and seen. Jung valued the importance of human encounters in this process. Sometimes a new relational experience can do more for healing than years of emotional isolation. 6. Rethinking your story. Finally comes the most subtle and powerful transformation, seeing your pain as a path. Jung didn't promise the absence of suffering, but the ability to transform that suffering into self-knowledge and purpose. What was once a wound can now be a portal, a breaking point that also becomes a starting point. You no longer have to live in the shadow of the father you never had. You can use this absence to build presence. You can use silence to create voice. You can use the past as fuel, not as a prison. And as this healing deepens, a new possibility emerges, that of becoming the father you needed to have, a strong, present, welcoming inner guide. An inner father capable of guiding your life with confidence and truth. That's what we're going to talk about in the next chapter. The new relationship with the inner father. Healing the wound of your father is not just about closing the past. It is about making room for a new beginning. An internal fresh start where you no longer need to be guided by absence, criticism, or the expectations of others. This is where your inner father is born. The symbolic figure that you build within yourself to guide your life with security, firmness, and self-love. Carl Jung believed that every human being carries within them two principles, the maternal and the paternal. The maternal principle welcomes, nourishes, and protects. The paternal principle guides, strengthens, and directs. When the external paternal figure fails, it is possible and necessary to develop this function internally. This new relationship begins with a choice, to take on the role of guide of your own life. no longer waiting for approval, permission, or recognition, but acting from a solid inner center built on truth and conscious presence. 1. Rewriting inner authority. The inner father is not a repetition of the father you had. He is the idealized version of the father you needed, an inner model who does not judge but guides, who does not demand but encourages, who does not abandon but remains. You can develop this figure through daily reflections. If I were my own father right now, what would I say to myself? Guided visualizations. Imagine yourself being welcomed and supported by a wise version of yourself. Active stance towards life, making decisions, setting limits, assuming commitments, not out of obligation, but out of maturity. 2. Strengthening self-confidence. Every choice you make with clarity reinforces the presence of your inner father. When you say no to what diminishes you, yes to what strengthens you, or simply act with integrity, you are reaffirming that you can trust yourself, that you have direction, that you know how to guide your own journey. This process doesn't happen overnight, but it is built in layers, in small, everyday actions. Every time you respect yourself, listen to yourself, and take a stand, a piece of your inner father is consolidated within you. 3. Freeing yourself from the victim role. Taking your own path also means breaking out of the cycle of guilt and resentment. This doesn't mean forgetting what hurt or pretending nothing happened, but it does mean not allowing the past to dictate the rules of your present. True emotional freedom begins when you stop waiting for someone else to fix what you've broken and decide to become whole on your own. That's maturity. That's autonomy. That's reconnecting with the power of being who you are. 4. Transforming pain into purpose. Many people who heal their wounds end up becoming role models for others because they understand in practice what it means to carry the weight of absence and the value of being present for themselves and others. The wound is transformed into compassion, and personal healing expands into collective impact. You are closer than you think to becoming that inner parent and living with the confidence you may never have been given, but can now build with your own hands. If this content is helping you, please like the video. This shows us that this type of message makes sense and helps spread this transformation to more people. Healing a paternal wound is not about forgetting what happened. It is about remembering without suffering, acting without repeating, and living without carrying burdens that are no longer yours. Throughout this video, you understood that the absence or rigidity of a father figure may have left invisible marks that shaped your fears, your relationships, and even the way you see yourself. But you also discovered that these marks are not a condemnation. They can be the beginning of a great reconstruction. Jung's psychology shows us that healing does not come from outside. It does not depend on the father's regret, nor on belated recognition. It comes when you look inside and decide to stop repeating, stop running away, stop hiding behind a mask. Because now you know, you can be the father you never had. You can be firm with compassion, you can be strong with gentleness, you can be your own guide, present, stable, and reliable. That is the true power of maturity, taking back ownership of your own story. And if you've made it this far, I want to thank you. It means you had the courage to look at something profound, something that many people avoid their entire lives. That is already an act of transformation. From here, you can continue this journey, whether it's with therapy, reflection, or simply with new habits that come from self-love. The important thing is to keep going, one step at a time. And remember, you are not alone. If this message made sense to you, if something inside you moved during this video, subscribe to the channel. Here you will find many other contents about emotional healing, self-knowledge, and building a more conscious and true life. And if you want to go further, share this video with someone who needs to hear it. Sometimes a single insight can change an entire destiny. Your past may have hurt you, but your present can set you free.